Hey everyone, this is Brett from Link Digital, and I'm going to show you how to install CKAN on a brand new Ubuntu 20.04 virtual machine. My environment that I'm doing all this work on is a 2018 Mac Mini, and I'm running macOS Big Sur 11.5.2. And to create the virtual machine, I am using VirtualBox 6.1. So let's go. I have also taken the install CKAN source code directly from the online documentation, and I've created a little file here that I have on my other screen that I'm showing you now, which is what I'm using to pick out the commands rather than scroll through the online documentation. But it's exactly the same, and so let's see how we go. So the first thing we do, well, as you can see, I have already created my virtual machine. It's Ubuntu 20.04. and I'm going to install CKAN, the latest CKAN version, and at the moment the CKAN version is 2.9.3. So let's see how we go. Now, this is brand new, so I'm not even sure this is really going to work that well, but we'll just record it anyway and see how far we get. Now, the first thing we do is we install all the system libraries. This is pretty much installing every system library we need for the entire CKAN install, and it does take a while, so we'll see how long it takes. I've actually just moved my work environment from a very old MacBook Pro, a 2015 MacBook Pro, over to my Mac Mini that I bought a couple of years ago. And and so I'm assuming it's going to be a lot faster. Previously, when I recorded something on my old MacBook Pro, the fan would kick in pretty much straight away, and it was quite noisy. So at least, although I can actually hear the fan running now on the Mac Mini, but it's definitely not as loud. Oh yeah, so it's a little bit quicker, but not much. Okay, so the next thing we do is we set up the main directory where we install CKAN, and that's userlib CKAN default. although I don't really need to run this command, I will do. So I'm running everything that is in the documentation, even though that particular command I don't need to. Now I create a virtual environment, a Python virtual environment here now. In the user lib CKAN default directory. So that will be the root directory for the Python virtual environment that we use for CKAN. Okay, it's done. Now we run and activate now. So we activate our new path. So we'll be able to run everything from, so the path variable's changed, so I can actually have direct access into that user lib CKAN default bin directory. So the next thing is I install setup tools, and it's 44.1.0 is the version of setup tools that we require for CKAN 2.9.3. That worked. So the next step is we're going to upgrade pip, which is always a good thing to do. That's done. Now the next thing we do is we install CKAN, and as I mentioned before, the version we're installing is the latest at this time, which is CKAN 2.9.3. And this does take a little while. So as I mentioned before, we're installing CKAN using source. So there's two other ways that we can install CKAN. There's a package method as well, which on Ubuntu we install basically a DEB, a deb file. And the other way is installing into Docker containers, and I will be doing videos for both those at some point. And that's finished. Great. Okay, so we then, a good measure, we deactivate our virtual environment, and we're going to reactivate it again just to see if that still works, and it looks fine. Okay, so now we have installed CKAN. The next task we have is the database work, and we first take a look and see what databases there are installed after we've installed Postgres, and we see there's 3 databases there by default. So first thing we do after that is we create a user, the CKAN_default user, and next we create a database, and this is our main CKAN database, and of course it's called CKAN_default as well. Next thing we do is we create a directory where we put a lot of the configuration files, etc CKAN default, we'll change the ownership of that. And then we generate our main CKAN configuration file, our CKAN.ini file. So we will actually update that file with a couple of items that we need changed. Now the first change we need is the password that we've just used to create when we create that user, the database user. And after that, the next thing is we need to put in an entry for our CKAN .site_URL, and for this installation we're just going to use localhost 127.0.0.1. Save that. Now while we're here, we by default the Solar URL entry in this file is commented out, so that we just uncomment that, because that will be the URL for Solar that we'll use for this default installation of CKAN. And that's all we need to do at this stage for a very basic install of CKAN. So the next thing we do is we are going to so we've done the database work. The next section we are working on is the Solar stuff. So we update, we want to make a change to the server XML for our Solar Tomcat instance, and we want to find the connector port line in here, and we need to change that from 8080 to 8983. Save that. The next thing we do is we back up our original schema file, Solar schema file, and then we link a new Solar schema file to what we include from our CKAN installation. Now we can now restart our Tomcat server, and we'll just see how that looks on as a process on the server. And yeah, I assume that's fine. I thought I might have seen the port number in the process details, but we don't with this version that we're using. Okay, so we've done that. Next thing we do is we link our who.ini file that we need, and we'll go back to our sort of Python virtual environment area and our main CKAN software area, and we are going to now initialize of the database. And that was successful. We have this line, initializing database successful, and that's the line that we really want. Now the instructions say to also cd back to, in case we'd gone somewhere else in the installation, we go back to our main source area, and we want to now run CKAN and see if this works. That seems to be okay. So the next thing we do is we want to use a browser, and I will run a browser that's running locally on this Ubuntu instance, and so I need to go to my VirtualBox instance here, login, which is on my other screen. I'll drag it across, and so you can see. Now we just want to bring up a Firefox browser, and we want to try and connect through to CKAN. And remember, we're running on port 5000, yeah. So let's see what happens. And here we go. It's up and running. We're getting log output on the screen, and we have a CKAN landing page, so we would be able to log in here. Anyway, I hope that was pretty straightforward, and yeah, it went all pretty smooth. So thanks again.